We are so happy that you're here. My name is Andrea Wotan, and I am a member of the SRAG Plant-Rich Diet Task Force. We have worked very hard to find excellent speakers to provide information supporting our journey, and today is absolutely no exception, as I am incredibly honored to welcome all of you and our speaker, Dr. Kathleen Kevany. Dr. Kathleen Kevany is a Canadian expert on sustainable diets and plant-rich living. She is frequently called upon as a speaker and researcher on plant-based approaches. She is an associate professor with Dalhousie University's Faculty of Agriculture, where she invites broader thinking beyond conventional industrial animal-centric agriculture. To shift systems to plant-rich living, she works with a strong international network of colleagues in Turkey, Spain, England, Ireland, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, USA, and Canada. She is the author of many articles, book chapters, and a new book on systems thinking published by Routledge in 2020 entitled Plant-Based Diets for Succulence and Sustainability. Dr. Kathleen Kevany is a certified psychotherapist and is completing a certification in plant-based nutrition from Cornell University. During her post-doctoral fellowship with United Nations University, her research portfolio focused on the decade of education for sustainable development. So with that, I would welcome Dr. Kevany to talk with us about delicious dinner choices that can help cool our world. And I will just remind everybody to please remain on mute during the presentation, but feel free to put questions in the chat box and or reserve your questions for after the presentation, and you can raise your hand or you can just unmute yourself and ask a question. So take it away, Dr. Kevany. And am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Oh, it's perfect. Okay. Oh, what a joy. I, like others have said, you welcome me into your circle. I'm so grateful to be here and to feel like we're among colleagues and friends who are really spearheading what are critical conversations and actions right now. So thank you for the leadership of your team, Andrea, and the folks putting forward this challenge. I hope we rise to it and accelerate beyond it, because these are pressing times for action. So I'm going to speak a bit to that. So I'm going to share the screen here and get into some thoughts on how might we best do this together. It is opportune so that we can choose cooler foods to have a cooler planet, and our delicious choices, our dinners can change the world. It's not hyperbole to say this, we really have power together. So I'm a researcher, as Andrea rightly said, and I work on, pressing issues, and I look around and I think, what are the things we need to work on together? And to me, these are the 4 world priorities. We need to feed more people ethically and equitably. We need to avert climate crisis and reverse global warming, nothing less than a striving for these high standards. We need to increase health and prevent harm and diseases. Obviously, communicable and non-communicable diseases need our attention. And we need to increase, at the same time, food security, social stability, and we have to better respect our interconnectedness, one to each other, to all life forms, and to the planet itself. So I think we might all agree that these are pressures that we're facing, although we might articulate them in different ways. There may be others that are on your mind. But this is the combination of concerns that I work with when I consider systems approaches. So my friends, there's good news and there's bad news. So I'm going to start with the bad news. Okay, we're in the Anthropocene, as we know. This is the time when there are escalating climate crises. We see growing social inequality and inequity, such tremendous amount of injustice to the environment and environmental racism. We see urbanization happening at a pace where many municipalities can't really keep up, particularly in lesser developed nations. Diet-related diseases and communicable and non-communicable diseases are wreaking havoc on our healthcare systems. Environmental degradation and ecosystem deterioration. And we also see that we have sophisticated systems that are helping afford us this temporary refuge from the truth. At the same time, we can point to innovation in these times. We see tremendous advances in health. We're seeing people live longer. We're able to feed more people on the planet. We're developing more tools and leisure devices. We're able to communicate across the world. And in some ways, we're feeling better connected. We're living at a time when there are fewer wars than in previous epochs, and more people have access to education. And we're also in the rising tide of more people choosing plant-based. So what is with this growing interest in plant-based? Plant-based menus are a primary strategy. They are a kind of foundational approach to address our interconnected issues of health, environment, and the economy and equity. Plant-based strategies also can be lighter on our bodies. We can obviously feel better when we eat this way for optimal health. Can be lighter on our wallets. They can be more affordable and accessible, and they can be lighter on the planet. So with my team, as Andrea said, we developed a book that, in our view, offers brilliant, inspiring strategies that really align around systems thinking, because the complexity of our issues require strategies and solutions that are equally in line with the level of the challenge. So we share in this collection an array of proven truths, tools, and techniques that will reverse global warming and increase human, animal, and planetary health. Guaranteed if we do it together. You get your money back if we fail. So of course, this is the cover of our book, and I just want to share one of the quotes from a colleague in New Zealand who offered this in our book, Professor Boyd Swinburne. He says, "This is the direction we must go in, creating food systems which promote health and well-being, environmental sustainability, social equity, and economic prosperity. It is a huge ask, but this book is in the vanguard of showing the change agents of this world, which is all of us. I'm inviting all of us to join in this tonight, for all of us to turn this enormous challenge into the many exciting opportunities that we do have ahead." So if your library does not yet have this book, I really encourage people to access it. We gain very little ourselves at all. Of course, we're promoting this message not for a financial gain at all, but for getting the word out. And it really is a succinct distillation of key topics that help address some of the challenges we all can bring solutions to bear. So I want to point us to looking at some of the evidence in Canada in 2019, and then in 2020, we saw the best forthcoming food guide in our history. So previous to this, governments had been involved with talking with industry and having others join in the dialogue around what might constitute a food guide. And I know in the US, this continues to be a challenge as well. But this is what it looks like. And I know Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine have a similar plate that looks like this. So half of every meal should be fruit and vegetables. A quarter of the plate should be high quality grains, complex carbohydrates, and a smaller portion than we're accustomed to being a high quality protein. And you can see they're leaning towards plant-based in this. In the pictorial depictions from our friends in Health Canada, they offer water as the drink of choice with no milk. There is not a dairy group because the evidence doesn't bear out. So based on the best available evidence, dairy was removed. Although you can see there's a little bit of yogurt in that picture as well. So in addition, the government of Canada didn't really prescribe or propose to people how to break it all down into portions necessarily, aside from what you see here. But they did also advise these other actions. Cook more often at home because you can control what's in the food. Share more with others and avoid waste. When you cook at home, you can also set aside the leftovers and have those for other opportunities. Be more mindful with our eating. How nice that is to be reminded of that by a government and to appreciate the beauty and the enjoyment and the sacredness of our food. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite government program, sadly. And so what do we see? Agricultural policy, in my view, is health policy. Agricultural policy is economic policy, and it is social and environmental policy. The question is it good policy? So just in this depiction, you can see that we have agricultural policy on the top, and then the bottom right, we have environmental policy, and then health on the bottom left. And there's intersections there. What we don't see sufficiently is coherence. And in Canada, sadly, what we see in our government drivers are economic drivers, and agricultural policy dominates health policy in Canada. And because we are an export nation, we emphasize revenue generated largely through animal agriculture, lobster as well. There's many land and water-based food systems that we look to capitalize on. So it has consequences for the environment, it has consequences for health, and working towards a greater coherence is part of our call to action here tonight. So looking at the reality, the accumulating and very compelling evidence. So gases produced by animal agriculture are the leading contributing cause of climate change. Pretty much there are many who will come to acknowledge this is in fact bearing out in folks doing research from a variety of places in the world. So those gases, of course, are methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide. Methane being one of the more potent gases coming from the ruminants, the belching of animals, and the nitrous oxide largely from our use of fertilizers to fuel tractors and other mechanization to help with feeding our animals in this kind of environment. So we have climate change happening with the greenhouse gases. Then we have water footprint. So just by comparison, to have a pound of pulses and a pound of beef, the water footprint is significantly different. We have 43 gallons to produce pulses and over 1,800 to produce a pound of beef. And that's water embedded all along the supply chain before one gets to consume the burger. So that's taking into consideration all the elements. And you can see the authors of this are well-respected researchers. Hoekstra has done work on water for quite a number of years. And all foods we eat have exact price or exact footprint. So there isn't anything that we consume that doesn't have a consequence. But what we want to be aware of is the collective impact. So just by way of example here in comparison, so here we can see countries that are consuming meat. Are you able to see this as the, you're able to see the countries?
Yep, we can see it.
So number one in the world, our dear friends in the United States of America are the biggest per capita consumers of meat. Canada was second until recently. And I don't have more recent pretty picture like this, but Brazil is rising in its consumption, as are other countries. You see China on the rise as well. What's also quite telling here is the amount compared to our friends in lesser developed nations, far less per capita consumption. So in order for us to have all of those animals for all of us to consume, because more than 90% of human population eat some form of animals, we need places in order to produce that meat. And deforestation wasn't an actual act, it wasn't a proaction, it was a consequence of needing land to both graze animals and to grow feed. So it wasn't like we actively set out to deforest. We went out to have more animals to feed more people. And the consequence of those animal agricultural practices are the vast amounts of deforestation. 70% of land that is cleared and burned is for grazing of livestock and for more animal feed. And even as of this last year, the primary cause and driver of the Amazon fires was animal agriculture requiring deforestation. And deforestation releases tons of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, in addition to the methane and nitrous oxide we accounted for in the cattle and in the fuel to grow the feed. We also have the deforestation and climate loss. We used to have sequestering happening in forests in that beautiful Amazonian fields. And unfortunately now much of that lung of the planet has been decimated by clearing. And of course, in addition to the carbon sequestering opportunity lost, we're also losing tremendous amount of biodiversity. It's being decimated to unconscionable levels. In our lifetime, we're seeing the extinction of so many. So I just need to share with you on that principle here, a quote from our friends at the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. They remind us that the overwhelming evidence of the global assessment from a wide range of different fields of knowledge presents an ominous picture, says the chair, Sir Robert Watson. The health of ecosystems on which we all and all species depend is deteriorating more rapidly than ever. We are eroding the foundation of our economies, the foundation of our livelihoods, the systems on which our food security, our health, and our quality life depend. 75% of land environment and 66% of marine environments have already been so significantly altered by human actions to the point of extinction of many. More than 50% of life on the planet has been caused to be extinct by human effort. And much of that within the last 50, 60 years, coinciding very closely with industrialized agriculture. Devastating. So again, here we are in a world that largely looks to animals as a big part of its diet without necessarily doing so consciously, without necessarily knowing the going on behind the curtain. It is not the idyllic family farm where most of our food is coming from. 74% of poultry is coming from intense confined feeding lots, 50% of pork, 43% of beef, and 68% of eggs are produced from animals in confinement. And of course, these concentrated feeding lots keep animals together in great density, which means they're up close and very intimate and personal, as you can see, which raises issues with their hygiene and with bacterial spread and virus spread. So antibiotics are used in great measure. More antibiotics used now in animal agriculture than human consumption. And of course, that's now wreaking some concern and havoc on the capacity for antibiotic resistance in humans. When we take a medicine for our own concerns, we're not able to bounce back quite as well. And of course, they're in these confined situations, so they cannot forage. So the humans then make some means available, most often mechanized, to help feed them with combinations of soy, corn, and grains. That's the deforestation to help produce the volume of food needed for these. And the volumes, I couldn't even have the heart to go into the billions of animals that are slaughtered every year for human consumption. And the number does not seem to be decreasing, but we have great potential to turn that around. So here we have all these animals no longer on pasture. They're in large confinement in many cases. And in the US alone, we see 1.37 billion tons of solid animal waste. This excrement, this manure management issue becomes this pond of concern for many in the region. The smell, the release to other water bodies, and the contamination itself in these ponds, this leads to potential eutrophication of water. And this excrement is at the level of 130 times greater than our own human heroic effort to add to this on the planet. And we are suffering the loss of quality of water life with algae blooms. And we see that in the Mississippi Delta, along with other places in the world. And again, we could point to environmental racism also being evident in communities that that are located near these conditions, where you would likely find it not near where people of affluence would speak out against it. The land use by protein type can also be a factor for us to be thinking about when we're bringing systems perspectives to our deliberations, trying to educate ourselves and educate others on just understanding really the truth of what we're working with here. So just for production of equal amounts of protein, so by gram, comparable amounts that a human would consume, this is how much land is needed for beef or mutton. Compared to pork, much less, as you can see. And a large part of that, of course, is also the feed that we want to raise to a fattening level our animals before they're being subject to slaughter. And that takes us all the way down to the plant foods that still require land, obviously, but at a much lesser amount. So the World Resource Institute has been helpful in devising some kind of distillation of complex data sets that bring it into I like these tools because they bring it into a digestible form. So they should reverse the title on this chart. So plant-based foods on the left are known to be less resource intensive than animal foods that are on the right. So on the right, you can see past that center line, how much resources are required in the use of land, which is the green. Then blue is both rainwater and irrigation or aquifers, which we're rapidly depleting. And then the orange yellow is greenhouse gas emissions. And greenhouse gas emissions coming from both the agricultural production itself and from the land change use. So deforestation, both of them measured in this assessment. So clearly it's again off the scale in comparison. But again, plant-based eaters also acknowledge that the footprint involved in any foods we're producing, particularly water. Water, you can see across all these foods, is of great concern. And nothing we do as humans does not have a footprint. So we're ever mindful of trying to be kind and inclusive in our dialogue with others to recognize that we want to find the best path forward. So my friends, it does us no good to leave a dragon out of our calculations if we live near one. And I dare say we are in one. We are in the hottest time of the planet and the most critical time for our action. It's no time for delay. We are called for urgent campaigning, coordinating, as you're doing this collection of calls and talks are really timely and critical. So some significant shifts we're looking for. So when a system reaches a critical point, when they are at the edge of chaos, this may be the juncture for substantive systems change. Are we there? Is this it? Is this it? Are we at the edge of chaos? Are we ready to make the change? Certainly in COVID, many people have said more are waking up to this reality. I say, let's seize this moment. Let's make this the critical point. We need to call on governments and industry, in addition to citizens, to make needed changes. And to address the determinants of health and disease, we must address this at the societal level and not put the onus solely on that of individuals or consumers or citizens to change their behavior alone. We need to change food environments. We need to change food systems. So I'm ever optimistic and I'm ever hopeful because I know we can do this together. And I know many more young people also see the imperative. So Paul Hawking and friends with Project Drawdown, I love this work. The most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. It's so audacious, this title. He can say it because there's no other collection that gives such a profound and comprehensive approach. So what they have done is they've mapped, modeled, and measured 80 strategies that are already happening in the world. They're already going on. They compared to many others, but came with the top 80 that give us a greater environmental return and a greater economic return compared to alternatives that are less favorable. Number one strategy for a solution to reverse global warming is to manage refrigerants. So we're producing a lot of refrigerants with air conditioning and obviously refrigerators, which is one of those innovations that's helped us increase food safety because we keep our food refrigerated. So that's a good thing, but the downside is it now has all of these hydrofluorocarbons eking out into the ozone and adding quite significantly to global warming. Number two is on-land wind turbines. Comparing to fossil fuels, even the cost and the embedded footprint to make turbines is far better. So the return on investment for turbines becomes so much more justifiable. Number three, out of all the solutions in the world, is to reduce food waste. And number four, this might surprise you, increase plant-rich diets. Number five is manage tropical forests. That means stop deforestation. Number six, I love this one, educate girls. And number seven, reduce family size or offer family planning. because of course, for every human, we all exact a footprint. So, and then you can go on and look at their website. All of them are excellent strategies. Let's do them all. Some involve animal agriculture as well. Let's do them. Let's do all the strategies we can, but let's invest in the best return we're going to get, which is in the top 5, the top 8, the top 10. So let's do these things. And it's so compelling. We cannot fail to recognize that reducing food waste and increasing plant rich are our top strategies that all of us can do on an individual basis, but we can also move systems to do this. So creating a sustainable future is out there for us. You know, it's within reach. So how do we feed 10 billion people? You know, we're not going to have this more land to do so. We're going to do so within the land we have, within our planetary boundaries that we're becoming more cognizant or more aware of. And we're going to do it while lowering emissions. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to need some innovation in improved animal production, because there still will be some of that, but there are so many more opportunities with alternative foods being available. I heard at the beginning of the call, people were talking about alternative milks as well. I love oat milk and soy milk, and I make my own walnut and chia milk. It's like there's no lack of opportunities to have decadent, succulent foods that replace harmful ones. And of course, we need to be thoughtful about resiliency in our food system, because those of us privileged enough to weather this, it will not be weathered equally. More disadvantaged people will suffer a great loss of food yields, because our food is very volatile given the climate crisis we're facing. And we've already seen that in Arab Spring, and we're going to see more of it the longer we delay to take action together. So what is the criteria we would use for making our food choices? Is it price, convenience, taste maybe? Food miles is something a lot more people are talking about, buy local. Carbon footprint, maybe animal welfare, human health, maybe positive memories like the comfort foods we like, building muscle. Well, in fact, this is kind of the listing and the frequency that people often buy their food by these kind of criteria. And health comes way low. Animal interests come very low, but it is really our opportunity to reconsider our own consumption patterns as well, and invite others to really look at what is it that they're using to decide what foods they're going to consume, because they're also contributing to those foods being produced, and what that means for our collective planetary well-being. So I really like this depiction. I've been asked by Routledge to head up the world's definitive guide on sustainable diet. So I'm really privileged to work with my co-editor in France. He has 2 doctorates. The guy just like, I'm so intimidated by him. He's wonderful. So we have devised with 100 other brilliant minds in the world to join with us on contributing pieces of this question. How can we create sustainable diets in these rather complex and diverse settings of the world? So there's not one strategy, there's not one remedy. It's a collection of localized, regionalized approaches. So looking at the health concerns, where can we use food to leverage for greater health? How can we address the burden of disease with food and look at consumption patterns? How about in biodiversity and climate? How can food be a tool to help with climate management and increasing biodiversity rather than decimating it? How can we address concerns around greenhouse gas emissions and many other elements associated with our environmental footprint? How about in equity and trade? Where are global trade and globalization practices benefiting some and hindering others, particularly in the global south? Tremendous amount of obstacles to having goods brought to market and getting a fair wage for their goods. So these are real concerns as consumers, particularly those of us in the global north, of an obligation really to consider the equity of food systems. So then we get also here to the local seasonal foods. How is land being used in our region? What kind of crop diversity are we supporting? We are limiting every year more and more the amount of plants that we're producing on the planet, and even animals are being brought down to a much smaller genetic pool, we are putting ourselves in jeopardy with the loss of diversity, even in our own food system, as well as what we've lost in the wild. In terms of culture and heritage, where are our skills around food production, learning about food, growing our own food, purchasing food, storing food? Much of that, is that being passed on from generation to generation? How are we relishing and treating food as sacred? And then looking at the nutrients and health of food. What quantities are suitable for us as humans? How much protein do we need? What are the nice benefits or balance between having enough food to eat and ensuring others have at least minimum? So I really like the work of Larry and colleagues on sustainable diets, and recommend people point to it if they wish to. So we're going to some good news to close off here with thinking about more Americans cutting back on meat. So this is from 2019. You can see overall 23%. And this is a good sample. It gives you rather a household depiction, like the over 2,000 is a really good number. And so we can trust these numbers to say, yeah, we're seeing a significant, say a quarter of the population, at least considering eating less meat. And you can see women at 31% and men at 19%. And I suspect these numbers are going to continue to increase. We certainly have seen since COVID, more interest in plant-based. And we know that younger people, a colleague of mine at Dalhousie, Savay Shalawahi, and colleagues found in their study of asking people about plant-based that 63% of those under the age of 36 were inclined to select more often plant, if not always, at least more often. So it's encouraging also to know the consciousness is being raised with events like this and many others. So the global supply chain also from CNN Business suggests that by the year 2025, you can see that meat alternatives are not even a serious contender in the marketplace, just a marginal. We saw recently what happened in the IPO, the initial public offering of Beyond Meat. They did the highest offering in one day when they came out public. And same with Oatly just this year. Oatly itself has done very well in the market as well. So, follow the money. And if you look into the future, get your crystal ball. I think if we are earnest in this, we are going to see it switch. We will see greater amounts of alternative foods made available because you can do so without causing harm to a cow. You can still have that experience if one wishes it. And it can all involve plant foods at a fraction of the impact. So I do think that we're moving in the right direction. We need to expedite it. We need to get that dragon breathing down many people's backs, I guess, or necks. So just as an example here, Beyond Meat, the future of protein is in plant. We can call it that. We can all say this is happening because the evidence is revealing this. So we know that we need to feed more people, but beef production is currently one of the most sought after because so many people love their burgers. And so there's finding alternatives to the heavy footprint that's involved in them. And the solution, of course, our friends at Beyond Meat would say is their plant-based burger, Beyond Beef. And then who says it has to be animals? That is our foundation for food. Clearly, we are much more innovative than that. We can create the experience, have the texture, and we don't need to involve any death and horror in the process at all. And in fact, it becomes quite ingenious. And in the end, you can see from the University of Michigan, they did a life cycle assessment. The comparison of the footprint is shocking, really. These are not unlike many other comparisons one would find by just looking at the data, and very compelling benefits arising from choosing the plant burger compared to the animal burger. So you might recognize this fellow in the center, the famed movie director, James Cameron, and his wife, Susie. They're here in Canada at the launch of when they bought Canada's largest organic pea protein facility in Saskatchewan. Do they think this is a trend? Do they think this is a fad that we're moving away from? I dare say not. And since then, actually, this business has grown even more and been sold on to others. So it is people of all walks of life, people of all different backgrounds are seeing the merit of really pronouncing plant-based as our strategy if we want to protect the planet, protect our health, choose to treat with greater equity all human beings and the planet and all animals. So if whole foods, plant-based diets are known to be the most protective of the planet and are found to prevent and reverse disease, and they far exceed the results from pills and procedures, should this not be our default? So Dr. T. Colin Campbell, he points to many signs of the dangers of scientific reductionism as an inadequate approach to our interconnected problems. And so he argues for more holistic systems thinking, as I do, and we must all see the value of the whole. So of course, I urge people to read this book by Colin Campbell, great book. So my call to action for everyone, 4 things, kind of the easy one first to getting to the harder one. Cool our planet by opting for whole living plant-rich diets. Easy schmeezy. Facilitate structural changes that make plant-based meals now the mainstream. It's the normal. It's right there everywhere. So let's help make that happen wherever we can. Thirdly, let's call to account. Let's call to action in loving ways, in clear ways, with good data, all the officials we can to foster health, environmental, and ethical outcomes that necessitate the reduction in government subsidies of animal source foods. It only is a rational policy choice. So it's not emotional, it's simply science, and it's simply the evidence that economics is also going to drive this. The better our arguments, the better we can get partners from government on board. And then lastly, the excellent work of Helen Harwood and colleagues at Harvard on Talk Up Peak Meat. We are at peak meat, just like Project Drawdown is when the point in time when we're drawing down carbon and we're no longer emitting it. Peak meat is also a point we have gotten to the top and we are on our way down. So let's tell people that. Let's use the language that talks about changing menus that are more economical, that are environmentally friendly, that are healthy, and that are ethical. All of these actions together are really delicious. They're really opportune, and they can really call out the best in all of us, which is really what I'm hoping we're all ready to do. So with that, I thank you very much for your time and your interest. And I invite anyone who wishes, I head up the Plant Rich Living Researchers and Practitioners Network. You're welcome to join with us. We often have dialogue of sharing of events and trying to move to action together, and some of the references. And thank you. And I'll stop the screen there.
Wow. Kathleen, I just cannot thank you enough. That was just an amazing presentation. I am sure everyone would agree with me. Not only was it so incredibly informative and in so many ways comprehensive, I feel inspired. Like this is really possible. And what I love so much about your approach is that it's warm and it's inclusive and it's inviting to people to join in this new way of doing things. So I cannot thank you enough. And for all of everything that you are doing. Yeah. Wow. So I invite everyone to ask your questions. You can put questions in the chat. You can raise your hand and you can just blurt them out if you would like. And I just would love to say, Dawn Byford says in the chat, Kathleen, fabulous, Kathleen. Thank you so much.
Nice.
A very emphatic. Thank you. So are there questions? I certainly have one. I think I'll just go ahead and start us off, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, and I would have questions to ask of the group too. So I'm ready for a dialogue as well, but please, Andrea.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, and I invite everybody, and I know there's a question from David, so I want to get to that one too. In fact, why don't we start with that one? He says, please ask Kathleen about the footprint for Beyond Meat production. There's a lot of processing, apparently, in the production of those products. So how healthy are they? Where did I get? Really? And what resources do they consume during the processing? Homemade veggie burgers are probably much better, and I do not care to have hemoglobin as part of my burger, which apparently is added to these commercial veggie burgers. Thanks.
Right. No, excellent points, and I share your view. It's not really my food option, but they're not targeted to us, those of us who are plant rich. They are targeted to animal eaters, and they're an alternative to help move that palate into something other than animal, which in my view is a good thing. So I don't advocate processed food. I advocate whole food, plant-based, as Dr. T. Colin Campbell would recommend, but most of us don't have time to do it at that level that is required. So I think these alternative foods are a healthy option compared to the worst option, which is not how I like to do things. I never like to compare to something worse to feel good about a bad decision. I want us to compare to a higher standard, ever rising in our standards. So absolutely, they're not the best. The best is natural foods made home, done with love, done with spice, and the footprint is calculated in that comparison, that example I shared. And if you read the paper from the University of Michigan, you could see more of the details of the items that are added throughout the journey. So it's true that there's many things embedded in them that you don't need if you make your own burgers yourself. You can make delicious burgers with all sorts of lentils are easy to work with, and adding vegetables to them. There's lots of combinations of things that still stay together and that can go on a barbecue if people are inclined to do it that way. So yeah, there's options, but we at the moment are still comparing to a worse example. So we can say that it is much improved, which is true, but we still want to move the bar further on to even having healthier food. But most of the clientele that's directed to are nowhere near that camp yet. So let's be patient. Let's help move them along with taste and introduce them to foods when they haven't taken the step themselves to buy them.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Does that sound logical to you, David?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that sounds logical. I agree completely with what you say. I just wanted to hear you talked about them, so I wanted to hear the address that, and you made a point, and I know that's where they're directed to. So that's the first step. I agree, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was going to ask the group. I know, Andrea, you had a comment too, but I would be curious how others on the call are feeling about the movement. Do you feel that you're part of a movement? Do you feel the momentum of the movement? Do you feel signs of progress? I'd be curious of what others are noticing.
I welcome it to open it up to the group. I certainly have a point of view, but I would love to hear everybody else's, if anyone.
Hi, it's Manon here. I certainly don't feel that there is a big movement, certainly not in Alberta, where just down the road you can see the cows grazing. It's so entrenched in our culture here to have beef. And of course, if someone would have told me 2 years ago that you should really drop beef, as a matter of fact, drop all animal protein, or drop dairy, drop alcohol, I would have said, you're crazy. But it took me running into a brick wall with my health, and as well as believing that I can't, if I got myself into this situation through lifestyle, then I should be able to get myself through this situation through lifestyle as well, and not just medication. So I think that we have a culture that relies a lot on the magic pill. We have a culture that doesn't have time to make at home. So I think those are really huge challenges. I mean, I'm hopeful, otherwise I wouldn't be eating this way. And I know the impact it has on me, but I certainly get the evil eye from some people when I say, well, I'm not going to eat that meat. Sorry, I don't eat meat. What do you mean? You're missing out, right? So we have a long way to educate, to raise awareness. And like I said, I felt pretty much alone in this. I'm the only one in my family, and Kurt, of course, is going along just because I'm the one who cooks. So, I allow him to have his beef when we go out. But anyway, it's a really big reversal in how we live as human beings, and we're so connected to our food through culture and advertising and what the government does behind the scenes to subsidize the dairy farmers, for example, and even beef. So I don't know, we can't stop. We need to keep going. But I think I think the dragon is going to burn down our house before we realize that he's right at our door.
Mm. I am, and I am in and out of that kind of state of distress and almost eco-anxiety. I've written about eco-anxiety before, and I have a piece in the conversation about it. But I can't give in to it. I am going to devote myself for the next 10 years. This is all that I am, dedicating myself to. I work crazy hours all on this agenda because I am optimistic. I agree with you, man. We don't see enough of a movement. We're still disparate. We're still in, segments across the countries and around the world. But I do see the numbers collectively rising, and those figures about the switch in products in the marketplace, they are an agent. They are going to help us, even though many of those are processed foods. There's still a beneficial device in enabling us still to eat nutritious food, even though it has more salt and fat than we need. But at least it will be a good transition until we get to even better options that are going to be in the marketplace by 2040, for example. When you talk about people saying you're going to miss out, and I joke with my dad because I grow up, I joke that I'm Irish Catholic and female and still in therapy for it, that I have all of these practices that we used to have in our household, and my parents are still both living, that we had over boiled vegetables and overcooked meat. And it was so unpleasant, everything we ate almost. And I'm like, yuck. And so my dad jokes with me now. He says, Kathleen, this is just condensed vegetables, when he points to a big piece of meat on his plate, and he eats meat several times a day. And I say, Dad, I'm trying to go through this life without a triple bypass and colon cancer, which he has had both. So I do it kind of tongue in cheek with him, but it's real. And it's not just him. It's everybody else who now demands surgery because of lifestyle. And all of those people who have lifestyle changeable diets, as you've said, man, and it was diet and lifestyle that brought you to where you were. Largely that can change and reverse with lifestyle. It is true. We are not inclined to be responsible ourselves. We are disinclined to challenge authority and to challenge the doctor, but really we need people to own responsibility for their bodies and to take over and use food as our medicine, but also to get political, get active in this opportunity to really look at what's available in our marketplace. What's the food environment like, so that we can have more options. So you're in an environment kind of like I am. I'm in a faculty of agriculture. You're in Alberta. We need heroes everywhere. So keep on it.
Kathleen, that was just lovely. And I want to open it up for more discussion of this. I want to read a lovely note in the chat because we have a mother-daughter team here. As we told you earlier, we have Margaret Bishop and her absolutely extraordinary daughter, Dawn Byford, who's a member of our Plant-Rich Diet team. Margaret writes, my daughter Dawn has been edging her dad and I to more plant-based eating. Luckily, my husband is open to my experiments. From this wonderful information SRAG has offered, I am even more encouraged to try more plant-based experiments and experiences. Thank you, with multiple exclamation points.
Good news. That is great news. I'm happy to hear it. And if I can help in any way, I'd be happy to offer any additional assistance, because I understand you're in Halifax. So if there's a connection to be made, that would be neat to be able to do so even in person.
Thank you so much for that comment, Margaret. Thank you, Kathleen. I saw that Doug had his hand up, and I would love to invite him to ask his question. And if you'd like, I'm sure he's got an opinion or a point of view on your question.
Hi, good evening. Yes, no, mine's it's more of a comment and a question, but I noticed that you did mention Project Drawdown and that you are a big fan of Project Drawdown. And I just wanted to mention that SRAG, the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group, which we are a part of, has an MOU with Project Drawdown. And to develop exactly what's happening here, the Plant-Rich Diet Task Force. So we have a drawdown climate solutions task force, and in addition to this task force, we also have a task force on renewable energy, on cleaner cook stoves, which David is on the call as the co-chair of that task force, as well as a food waste task force. So we're totally 100% behind your interest in Project Drawdown, and feel that it's a great solution. And I think the fact that a plant-rich diet and food waste and food systems in general were so high on that list of Drawdown's list, that empowered all of us to move forward with this movement, as well as to be able to gives it credibility to expand it to other people. So
wow, that's very encouraging. I'm delighted to hear it, Doug. Congratulations to the team for coming to an MOU, because those kind of strengthen the efforts, and it kind of gives even more credibility to other actions that could come out of this. But if we did both of those together, reduce food waste and increase plant rich, that is more than even the top two strategies,
Right.
It is, it's an opportunity that's really accessible. So, and of course, all of the other ones that you're making mention of, like the stoves, again, those of us who are privileged, we often forget what kind of conditions others are living under, and they're taking down trees to boil water to have, particularly to prepare lentils or any of the beans. They take a lot of time to boil. And so these are issues where one doesn't have access to fuel for clean stoves and conditions. So I'm happy David and team are working on that.
That's great. Yeah, and it's a little bit off subject, sorry, but I noticed in your bio that you've been doing work in Dominica, in the Caribbean. I was just curious about that, because I live in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, but my wife and I owned an organic farm, really a food forest in Dominica for about 11 years. And 5 years of that, I was the vice president of DOME, the Dominica Organic Agriculture Movement, and we were trying to get group certification for both EU and USDA for the farmers in Dominica. So I'd be really interested in what your experiences down there have been.
Yeah. So just quickly on that one, I was there because we were working on collaboration, particularly to help young people see opportunities in food. Where could there be business opportunities for and entrepreneurial prospects? And of course, again, that puts the onus on the young person, as opposed to changing the system that, all of these global trade factors are at play, even getting the barcode that many countries require the barcode before products can be included in the grocery store. So of course, all of these logistics are part of the analysis, but we were working with them on value addition in food development and opportunities. So I was in, of course, the capital city many times, and just love the people that I've had the privilege to work with in Dominica. And so Dominica State College was our partner. And many other, all the professors and colleagues associated with that, you would probably know many of them who are involved in food production.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, because USAID was sponsoring a course in organic certification for the farmers. And what was really interesting about that was that most of the young farmers, the organic farmers, had all been trained in Cuba, which of course has the most advanced organic system of agriculture in all of the Caribbean. So yeah, Dominicans are wonderful people.
Thank you. What an interesting discussion, and what a neat connection. Thank you for sharing that with all of us, Doug and Kathleen. Kathleen, we have another question from Mohan in the chat. Thank you for the excellent presentation, Kathleen. Could I ask, what is your view of lab-based meat, given that the composition is pretty much the same as real meat? I am also wondering, given it uses cell replication, I am concerned about the ethical aspect, whether the process uses live organism.
Yes, it does use cellular meat does use animal cell. And so there's a whole continuum of items that are going to be available in the marketplace. And so we haven't quite got commercialization levels yet of cellular meat, but it is certainly coming. It won't be foods that I would choose, but it is a better option for those who would choose an animal. So again, kind of coming back to the opportunity to compare, Beyond Meat to a burger, it is better. It's not the best, but it's better than the worst. So it's not, so I think I'm open to the kind of opportunity in the commercial space that we afford industry within means, of course, that they're healthy foods, that they're not full of levels of salt, which I find so many of them are. I have tried many of the plant-based, the burger. I don't even like to even say that I'm eating something that's a sausage because I don't want to replicate meat, which is in our own book, the Sustainable Diets book. We have an author, Dr. Tony Weiss, who's the author of the book Hoof Print. So he's well known for calculating what's happened because of animal agriculture. And he writes a chapter in this book saying that we are being mindful of continuing the meat-centric diet by just having these foods, which is true. So as Manan said, we need to kind of shift away from that thinking, and that's going to take quite a long time because it's very cultural, it's very religious, it's very self-identity focused. And we don't necessarily have to bring change to that level for people, because if we try to do all of that, it'll take too long before we make our shift. We have to work on something rather swift and easy, and that is taste buds. So if we can use these tools as humans, we are not going to be quick to let others help us make the change. So we have to find other approaches that are going to be appetizing.
Great question. And thank you for that thoughtful answer. Dawn.
Hi, Kathleen. Thanks again. Just such a fabulous, fabulous presentation. I love your passion and education and all the science, and it's just awesome. So speaking of taste buds, you had mentioned in the title that it was delicious dinners, and I'm curious if you have some either cookbooks or suggestions of your favorite dinners that you love that are plant-based.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question, and thank you for your support and your kind words. And for you and your mom being a team on this, I love that. Yeah, there are so many good resources. I'm just going to go get one here. So I have a website, and I run monthly free webinars for people to learn about plant rich, and it's called Eating a Vibrant Life. And I was hoping to have Brian Terry come and join us. I don't know if anyone knows him because he hasn't replied to my email. So if you had his email, I would like to connect with him. So definitely diversifying the type of food. I would recommend learning cuisines that are plant-based from folks who come from different life experiences. Oh, She Glows, of course, is like on the top of many people's lists. A friend of mine at University of Toronto, she's written a book at George Brown, actually, on the plant table book, I think, and it is exquisite. Yeah, I'm not really good at following recipes, so I don't use them very much myself. I kind of make things up. During COVID, I made bean brownies every which way, every week. There wasn't a week I didn't have bean brownies on the go. One, you can eat them for breakfast. I don't add sugar to anything. I make it with dates and peanut butter or other nut butters, and they're brownies. And I put nuts in, of course, but it's always beans. So the best combination I had was white bean with peas. Peas and white bean together, really tasty. And then any other combination of sweeteners that one likes. You can add honey or maple syrup as well, should you be inclined to add more sweet, but I find dates often sufficient. But if I'm making it for someone else, just like I make green smoothies, some people like them. I have my mom and dad drinking them when I'm with them in Ontario, and they will have it, but my dad calls it alfalfa. But I think that in terms of food options and dinners, it is really delightful now that we have such an array of choices. So one of my defaults is Mediterranean and Indian. I kind of use a lot of salads. I had salad tonight, and I also made beet soup. So friends made turkey over the weekend for Thanksgiving, but in another bowl, they prepared their vegetables. So they had broth that was cabbage, yams, and carrots. So I took the broth and I used that to make the soup. So I had beet soup tonight. So I put the greens, the tops of the beets together with the broth, and I used a vegetarian, I cheated a little bit with some broth base, and then I used some of my own white bean hummus that I made the other day, and I just put two or three dollops of that in to add the flavor. But I found it scrumptious, but I love my food. So there isn't anything I can't turn into something fun for me. Not everyone necessarily would like it because they're accustomed to maybe more salt or more fat, because I hardly use fat. But yeah, I think there's no end to good opportunities. And of course, online, there's a repertoire of wonderful free material available for people looking to learn. But they can also join us for our monthly seminar on eating a vibrant life. You can also email me and my colleague will put you on the list.
That sounded absolutely delicious. I can't wait to have bean brownies. I need to do that. And white beans and peas. I've never thought of that combination. What a great idea. I want to go to Scott's question, but before we do, could you tell me the exact website for your weekly program? Because I'd like to put it in the chat for everybody.
Yeah, and it's monthly. And it's, yeah, I can do that too while Scott asks his question.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Is it my turn?
It is your turn, Mr. Nelson.
Okay. Kathleen, can I put a question in your mouth?
Please.
But first, I want to answer your question. Do I see a global movement? And I do actually. I've been staring into this topic for about 30 years, maybe more actually. But I just see so many different entities working on this problem. And what I want to see is kind of like a glue that like puts it all together, right? So your question could be, well, what are you guys doing about it? And of course, we've got a couple of co-hosts. We've got this whole team that put on this whole series of presentations. We're recording it. We're going to try to breathe a whole lot of life into what we've put together. And your presentation has been so confirming. It sounds to me like you almost wrote a manual for the movement there. So, man, I want to get a hold of that and take a look at that. Well, Rotary right now has this big global project called Polio Plus, where it's glued everybody together to eradicate polio from the planet. And we're almost done with the project. So some of us have this idea that the next big thing of Rotary is Plant Rich Plus. Rotary could take this on as the next big, let's glue it all together, the Kathleen Kevany's and all the other people that are working on this, and really make a big gel out of it. So that's what we're cooking up here.
I love it. I'm coming to that dinner. Yeah, I love what you're cooking up. That is excellent. And I think it's a great language too, Plant Rich Plus, because there's so much that's going to be gained from this. There is nothing to lose and everything to gain when we choose this option. We're going to improve the planet. We're going to improve health. We're going to improve equity. If we genuinely are concerned about the well-being of people on the planet, we must default to plant. We must.
It's
not optional.
Win-win. It's win-win-win.
It is. And all of the recent reports, Dr. Marco Springman from UK, his 2020 says it's not going to happen if we don't default to plants. Of course, Eat Lancet report leans to plants. All of the reports coming in these last number of years, OECD itself, there is a movement, but it is, as you said, I think it's still not as connected. We need the glue. And I think we are all part of that glue. And it's going to get, a little messy at times, but let's do it.
That's what happens when you cook, right? You just clean up the mess.
What a great, oh my gosh, so inspiring to hear you two kind of throw that around and banter it a bit and brainstorm. I want to
See what will stick to the wall.
like the plant rich
Like
pasta.
spaghetti.
Yeah. It is 9:08, so we want to respect your time if you need to go. We totally understand that. We do have another question from Anju if you do have some time.
I would rather stay in dialogue.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thank you again, Kathleen, for your wonderful presentation. We're so lucky to have you here with us. Your message is so critical and so important. So thank you. I did want to answer your question. Sadly, I do agree with Manon, where I also work at a hospital. I'm a dietitian, and here in Michigan, at one of the largest hospital systems, and I still constantly have doctors. I went to go do a diet education on a person with diabetes, and I was telling this person to eat, it's okay to eat fruit, it's okay to eat fruit with the skin. And he was so confused and so perplexed, and he looked at me like I was crazy. And he had said, my doctor said I can't have fruit, I can only eat basically, he's like, I can have any meat. So he could have beef and chicken and fish, and just to stay away from the carbs and the fruit. And so sadly, I still am really feeling this on a daily basis, that it just feels like we're kind of, it feels defeating a little bit, but I know, as you were saying, it's good to have that perspective of the whole, that we are moving in the right direction. But just personally, it still kind of feels like I feel like I'm just going through the motions, and I'm not, I really want to make an impact, and it feels like I'm being held back a little bit. So that was just an answer to your question. And the question I had was about, with your background in agricultural policy, I'm just so curious, because a lot of, there's a lot of backlash from farmers who say they're, will lose their livelihood and their jobs if we move in this plant forward direction. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and kind of what the way to move forward is on that.
Yeah, happy to remark on it. I feel your pain, and I feel that struggle that you see so close to a healthy option. And even physicians don't understand diet. Of course, they don't understand nutrition. And of course, the physicians for responsible medicine there, and many here, are striving to try and get it into the curriculum, so much more prevalent, not just in professional schools, but all the way through school, that we need to learn about food literacy. We've lost that at all levels. So I'm working with a young physician. She did her research with me on community food literacy in rural areas. And in the journey, she bought the book and has become plant-based. But I didn't, coach her on that. We were just asking questions to the public about their level of food literacy. And she is such a champion of now bringing this to the med school. And we need people like her everywhere. And of course, we know that it's still small. The movement is small relative to the machine. The machine is much bigger than we are. And we can't deny that, and we can't be delusional about it. But I think we have to fortify ourselves with these kind of dialogues. So yeah, it's painful. And I see it every day at the Faculty of Agriculture. I'm a lone voice, and yeah, I'm not encouraged so much when I see what my colleagues are up to, but they're tinkering. They have good intention. I was invited to give input to other courses. So there's an appetite, but certainly not ready for the shift that we're talking about. But when it comes to the transition, what I'm calling it is it's a just transition and a fair transition. So it is a transition. We're not going to tell anyone they're going to be out of business in the next 5 years. We're not going to do away with agriculture that's animal-based, even in 20 years probably, but we are going to decrease the numbers, so that if we call peak meat what it is, then subsidies need to start going over the next 10 years to another pathway, like alternative, like growing possibilities with peas and hemp, and making combinations that are plant-based. Mm-hmm. It is a far cry of the revenue one gets from plants versus the revenue one gets from animals. They're like not comparable. So it's understandable there's resistance from farmers, because absolutely their livelihood is at stake. So we need to collectively do that strategy and policies with governments to have an agricultural strategy that affords a just transition. It's not unknown to us. We've seen it before in tobacco. We moved farmers out of tobacco, not immediately, but over time, many went into ginseng and other options. It's a comparable product, mind you, because you're still talking about a plant. And the income was very different, however. So that we need government subsidies to transition us to healthier options, because we're paying the price later down the food chain anyway. We're paying in healthcare, we're paying everywhere else. We're just neglecting to honor or be truthful about the costs. So part of what I try to do is do the full cost accounting in other talks of, touching on everything around health, because the cost to illness is so great. The loss of productivity, the emotional costs. We forget to even talk about the emotion of illness and family burden of someone being ill. There's so much that we don't talk about. But if we did a full accounting, we would see how much more important it is for us to justly transition out of animal. We're still going to have some on the planet, as you can see, I think, in the next 20, 30 years. But we have to help families see their way to this new prospect. And governments need to be on side.
Thank you. That's such a great analogy, with the tobacco industry as well, and kind of moving that transition. So thank you.
And thank you for being formidable force, even in the face of difficulty, because I know that can't be easy for you. So hang in, continue to educate.
Thank you. I'm trying my best.
Dr. Kevany, let's see, are there any, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much. Are there any more questions? I know Amber-Ree, who is a member of our team and just such a stalwart, just incredible, she lives in Singapore, so she was able to join a little late. And Amber, do you have any questions since you were able to join more recently? Anything you'd like to ask Dr. Kevany? And you don't have to.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. No, I think I'm pretty good with the questions that have been asked. I think anybody in this field will acknowledge that it's not the easiest and the most it's not the easiest and the work that happens in comfort zones. We are definitely stretched beyond that. So yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful talk.
Pleasure. Glad that you're able to join us, and glad that you're spreading the word where you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Dr. Kevany, if I could just impose on your time just a couple more minutes, only if you have the time.
Sure.
But we have COP26 coming up. and if anyone on the call is not aware of what COP26 is, I'll do my best to describe it. COP stands for Conference of Parties. This is the big global climate greenhouse gas negotiation that is happening in November. It is seen as, and I think is, kind of the world's last hope to make progress on commitments by nations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And hopefully there will be discussion of other environmental topics. As of right now, there is no guarantee that COP26 is going to talk about, I believe anyway, the impact of animal agriculture on greenhouse gas emissions. What is your view of what's happening with COP26? What, if anything, we can be doing to encourage policymakers, anybody, to move in the right direction?
I think, yeah, not unlike Anuj, the opportunity isn't there yet for families to see the prospect for business outside of what they've known. And I think governments are the same. They are reluctant to reduce their kind of design of the economy. And this is quite a shift that we're proposing. And again, it can't happen immediately. It needs to be a transition, and it needs to be a just transition. So I advocated in Canada, with our network, we hosted an event to ensure that we were feeding into the UN system a plant-based event, so that they couldn't just say that they didn't hear from folks about plant-based. We hosted one, and we had a member of parliament who's plant strong, and they so we can only do what we have the power to do collectively, but we should be wise and prudent, or I guess strategic, in leveraging those agents who are concerned with us. yeah, I'm always listening when people talk about climate crisis on the radio, and they just go short of talking about food, and they might talk about, buying local, drive less, kind of the standard things that people often hear, but they are not the best strategies according to Drawdown. They're good and that we should do them, but the more important ones are neglected. So yeah, so we are asking a lot of individuals to do some shifting in their own lifestyle. So individual level and collective both have to happen. And as far as COP gatherings, we are not without voice still. Our representatives will be going. We can feed in, each of us, through a variety of mechanisms still. We have a delegation going. So I would say, let's not give up hope. Let's continue to work, and let's continue to do all that we can using Drawdown as a leverage point, but also there were great TED Talks called Countdown. We hosted an event. I organized that also, to do an event with Countdown, feeding in through that as well, and getting the word out of Plant Rich as and well, again, I reiterated what Drawdown brings to light in that forum as well. But I know we're still a marginal voice. We'd be yeah, we would be naive to think we are still at the edge, but that's okay. Let's continue. And it is imperative. Let's do all we can. This time is critical, but we cannot not do it. We must.
Well, thank you for really just a phenomenal discussion, and for your kindness to welcome us to be in touch with you, and to invite such a warm and positive and discussion full of possibilities. I feel really encouraged. And oh, Scott, did you have, oh yeah, that was a heart. I thought it was a raised hand, but a heart. Same here. So I think since we've already gone past time, I will unfortunately call our meeting to a close, because we could just go on for so much longer. Thank you, Dr. Kevany, for all of your efforts on behalf of all of us in the world. We are so grateful to you. We hope to stay in touch with you, and we wish you all of the best in all of your endeavors.
Thank you so much. And it feels so good for me to know you're all out there. Thank you for all that you're doing. And it was a real privilege to be in this circle tonight. Good luck with your good work as well. Let's keep on.
Thank you. Keep on. And thank you to all of you for joining. We are a community. We are a community. We're strong. Let's keep going together. Let's stay together and just keep forging forward, because we can do this. So thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Oh, stop recording.